Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So in this video, I wanted to talk about a programming language that people don't really talk about for software developers, and that is communication. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. This is clickbait. Why did I click on this video? But give me 30 seconds. 30 seconds. We're going to put a timer right there in a minute. 30 seconds to prove to you that communication is the same thing as programming and that it is worth working on it. And in the rest of the video, you will see how the programming concepts you learn apply to communication. So let's start the timer right now. When you program, you try to get a computer to do the sets of tasks that you want it to do. When you talk to somebody, you give them instructions in order for them to do what you want them to do. For example, for a job interview, you communicate to get a job. In a meeting, you communicate to get out of the meeting. And just like programming, you have different languages for different specialty, and you also have to debug, right? Why did that person not understand what I was saying? So that's why communication is just like programming. All right, so we managed to do this under 30 seconds, and I hope you are still here and you're not clicking away. And if you are, then let's go. So let's start with some fundamentals. In programming, if you've done some data structures and algorithms and things like that, you're probably familiar with the big O notation. So you have O of 1, which is constant time. Then you have O of n factorial, which is the absolute worst you could possibly do. Then you have the spectrum between those two. O of log n, O of n, then you have n to a power of something, and then n factorial. So these are your spectrum, and these are the people you're talking to. This is how much they understand and how fast they understand what you're saying. And so you have to think that you cannot control these algorithms going on in somebody's head. O of 1 is you immediately understand what you're thinking, right? O of n factorial is somebody who has absolutely no idea about anything related to technology. And so it will take them a lot of effort and brain power to understand what you're saying. So since you have no control over this range, who you're talking to, the only thing you have control over is n. And n in communication is the amount of information you provide to the person you're talking to, right? So if you provide a lot of information to somebody in the n factorial, it's going to take forever for them to understand. Somebody in O of log n is going to be much quicker. So you have to tailor your communication to the person you're talking to, right? When you are talking to somebody technical, you can keep all the technical details. But when you're talking to somebody non-technical, you have to keep in mind, is this information that I'm giving them absolutely necessary? Because it's going to take a long time to compute. So let me give you an example of something that happened to me. We were talking to a manager about identity to access something, right? And I was talking about the registering an application for that program. But the thing is, there's a lot of different identities in the programming world. There's in Azure, you have managed identities, user or system assigned, you have application registration, service principal names, you also have accounts, service accounts, and all the nuances in between. Now, in my case, it didn't matter. It was not important for me to talk about that identity being specifically an application identity. But I said it anyway. So you know what happened? The person I was talking to was trying to understand how this is different from all the other things that are, all the other identities that he's aware of. Whereas what I should have done is just mention that we're getting an identity. Doesn't matter what type of identity we're getting. No, the end result is the same. It is just waiting on one thing. And so this is my mistake. I added technical information to what I was talking about that did not provide value to what we were talking about. Now, of course, this person was interested in learning, and we went through the different identities and all that stuff, and he understood it at the end. But my communication was inefficient because I added information that was not important to process, right? And this also applies to individual pieces of information, right? When somebody already knows what you're talking about, they're faster to process it. But when they don't know, they might be at n factorial or worse, right? So you have to tailor your communication to the person you're talking to get the best effect. The more technical information you provide, the longer it may take. Also, do all the nuances, the technical nuances, matter in what you're saying? If they don't matter, then why are you saying them? Remove them and speed up the processes of that n factorial person, right? Try to get to the point, try to keep the technical stuff away, try to keep the code away from these people, and really just dig into what they care about, right? They care about the overall idea, they care about the results, the cost, the things like this. They don't care about the technical line of code or technical resource being used. The next thing related to programming is you have to go step by step. Just like in a program, when you talk to somebody, you have to give incremental steps that get you towards your goal, right? You have to have something that is logical and goes to the next and the next thing and the next thing. And if there's no reason why you're talking about something, add comments, right? Add your comments and be like, this is what this is doing, right? And in when you're speaking to somebody, comments would be like a little explanation as to why you're doing what you're doing or talking about what you're talking about. Just like in programming, also, don't do too much in one step. So if you have one step that updates your whole program, then it is very hard to debug. Same thing with talking to people. If you have one section that provides all the information for everything they need, that's going to be very difficult. Break it up into smaller sections, make it clear, this is the information that's provided and all that stuff. And the other thing is use if statement, right? When you write your script to talk to somebody, don't assume that a variable in their head is set to true. Don't assume that they know something, right? So check in with them. Are you aware of what this thing is? And if they're not aware of it, explain it. But don't assume that they already know what you're talking about. So write if, right? Write for loops in your statement and approach how you're talking to people the same way you approach a program, right? You don't know if they know something, so check, and if they don't know, then address it. If they know, you can skip over it, just like an if statement. You can skip over it and go straight into the thing. But if you skip over it by default, or you explain it by default, you make the person you're talking to very frustrated because they either don't understand what you're saying or they get frustrated because you think they don't understand what you're saying. Next thing is pick the right language for the task at hand. And I'm not talking about English versus Spanish versus whatever. Obviously, if the person doesn't speak English, pick the language they speak. We have different tools at our disposition to provide a better understanding and communicate more easily to people. One such tool is drawings, right? If you use a drawing, you can communicate complicated ideas in very few words, if any. And so try to master drawing, right? Especially if you're technical and you're like me in IT and cloud, having a drawing about how things work, how things are put together, and having a nice picture make people more comfortable. They see it. They don't have to imagine it, they see it. And that makes your task easier because you can just give them a picture, A picture is worth 1,000 words. So use pictures, get those 1,000 words for free. You can also use a video like I'm doing here, because the advantage of having a video is that you can communicate one-on-one and you can edit it, right? So here I have a lot of blanks that you will never hear. I have a lot of things that I've just said multiple times that you will never see. And I end up picking the content that I've said that really targets what I want to say without all the hesitation and all that thing. You can also make lists or checklists or whatever you want. If it's really like a sequential type of thing or whatever, don't just speak or describe things. We're very tempted to describe things and all that stuff, but sometimes, step one, step two, step three, step four, lists, very visual. You have to keep in mind that people are very visual, and so the fewer effort you make them do to understand the information, the better you are. And then you can also use things like stories. So if you want to talk to people about why they should care about something, right? A non-technical story about this is what the user went through, or this is like a use case of somebody else who's done it, and blah, 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 blah. Stories are always very good. We read stories to children because they understand it. It works, right? We don't read white paper or documentation to children, even though it probably would put them to sleep quite easily. But that's a different topic. We read stories to children because they're easy to digest. And the last thing is use helper tools. Just like you would with your programming, use tools to help you communicate better. Don't assume that the most basic tools you have are good enough, right? You would not write your code in Notepad. Notepad is most definitely good enough to write any code you need. But there are tools out there that help you with opening and closing brackets for you, coloring the code so you can easily see it, or show you the reference, or whatever, right? You have tools when you program. And similarly, you need to figure out the tools that work for you when you communicate. There are tools for drawing that, you can use an iPad, right? You can use an iPad to draw. You can use draw.io, which is a good tool that I use frequently. There are tools to help you write better. Definitely use spell check. I personally use Grammarly a lot. It has been a huge lifesaver for me because I tend to make things complicated, and it allows me to write my thoughts out. And then Grammarly is like, hey, your sentence is too complex. Consider breaking it up into segments, or consider changing the order of words to make it like clearer. And so one of the ones that helps me a lot is recording myself. The more I practice, the more I film these videos for you to consume, the more confident I get with speaking, public speaking, the more I realize things I do and say, and you know, I try to address them. So for example, right, the filler words that don't filler sounds that are useless. Uh, um, I used to say it a lot more than I do now. Things like right or okay. Like I see all my cues, all my things that I do that help me work on my communication with other people. You can also get other people's feedback. Think about it as like a pull request, right? Somebody else has to review your thing because before it goes into production. I like to send my emails to my boss when it's like, this is a sensitive topic. This is something that I want to be able to clearly communicate with somebody. And I'd like to have a second pair of eyes on what I wrote so that I know that it doesn't necessarily come across wrong, or it has all the information it needs. And it's great because I do this and I get feedback and I get to learn about things that I just think about on my own and how different they are from how other people think. And it's a great learning experience, and I would highly recommend you do things like that. Send it to other people, get review. If you have a partner, a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, even your dog, you know. I don't have one here, but a rubber duck, right? like like you do in programming, having a rubber duck, talking to people and who don't necessarily understand what you're saying, and just saying these things out loud, reading them out loud. Um, could also help you, you know, hearing these things could really help you. So these are tools you can use. It's definitely not exhaustive. There's definitely technologies out there that can help you better, and they're going to be more and more. But this is, you know, a small starter pack, if you will. Use the tools that help you. It is important to improve your communication, because the better you get at communication, the more likely it is that you get what you want the way you want it. And similarly to programming, right? The better you code, the more you practice coding, the better you will be at coding. I mean, every skill in general, the more you practice them, the better you get. So I hope you found this video useful. It really helps me to think about communication as a programming challenge as opposed to a social one. And, you know, once you start putting these into context of programming, you know, whatever the skill you master the most is the one that's helping you master another skill. So hope this was useful to you. Feel free to watch this video right here. That's what YouTube thinks you should watch. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.